welcome to episode 72 of Retropower Uncut. And it's been a pretty hectic week, to be honest. I'm going to start with Vader because a couple of big steps forward on that this week. I drove it for the first time. It's now MOT'd and ready for road testing session. And in the lead up to that, actually the day before, it had its second rolling road session. So we did an original map on normal 95 octane fuel, and we were a little bit disappointed with the results. I mean, my reasoning at the time was I thought, well, if it gets stranded out on the road and it's unable to find any super, it's in South Wales, might be nice just to have a normal map. However, it made, I think off the top of my head, 250 something horsepower, which was way down on where we expected. So we thought, well, we'll go back and do a second map on 99 octane. And the difference was just remarkable. We could run something like another, I think it was 10 degrees of ignition timing, of ignition advance. And so ended up making 285 horsepower, which is much closer to where we expected it to be. It was around that when it was engine dyno, a tiny bit more, but you're always going to knock back a little bit with the exhaust system and the air filter on there. So yeah, really happy with that. No issues at all on the dyno. Made the power we wanted, job done. So yeah, that was on the Wednesday, I think, or the Tuesday. On the Wednesday, I then took it out on the road for the first time. As always, with the first time it's ever driven, there are a couple of little things I need to address, but nothing major. I was really happy with the way it drove in general. Maybe I'm going to be doing some further road testing, might try and get some footage of that. At the moment I'm going to rebleed the brakes because I wasn't totally happy with the pedal feel on the brakes. And there were a couple of very minor niggles, but it's basically just getting some miles on it now. A couple of visual changes. We were waiting for a batch of Xylan coated parts, which I'll go into a bit more in a minute when we look at the Morris parts. But amongst those parts were all the exterior fasteners for this. We had a set of them on the car already. They were stainless steel or zinc plated fasteners, but we wanted them to be black. So we've got all of the exterior fasteners coated black now. They've been fitted, which really sort of completes that murdered out look that we've got going on. And I can't remember if they were already fitted last time, but there's wheel centre caps are in. We also received back a couple of parts that were being drawn last week. They've now been machined, which is the lettering for the back panel. So we've done in the Vauxhall font. There used to be individual letters that said Vauxhall across the back. We've copied that font but done the letters to spell the word Vader. They've been machined and they've just gone off today, I think, to be black anodised. So then once they're back, they'll be fitted on there. And then also the window winder knobs, I think I mentioned last week, that there was a slight oversight in that the cage was too close to the window winder to be able to wind them. And we designed these little round knobs so you could wind the windows with those. They were machined, they arrived back this week, and they've also gone for anodising with those other parts. So once those parts are back and the headlamp bezels are done, that's basically complete except for whatever crops up during road testing. So we're getting perilously close to handover on that one. If we have a wander over this way, Redux 2 is on the ramp, just in the very, very final few tying up loose ends jobs before that gets handed over. And the Mustang, I think the only notable progress this week is that we've fitted the prop shaft, and we've also done the gear shifter linkage. And we're basically edging towards the point we can start this for the first time. The next job, I think, we were having a meeting earlier planning the forthcoming week's work, and one of the things we're going to do on this is the exhaust system. Now, the owner did supply us with some parts, but we've offered them up and they're not really either the right shape or of any sort of decent quality. So we're going to, given that we've now got stainless steel manifolds on it, I think our plan now is to fabricate a stainless steel exhaust system for it. So we're going to do that. With that done, we've already got the cooling system plumbed, fuel system plumbed, oil system plumbed, the shifter's connected, there's some wiring in, there's a bit of finishing to do on the wiring still, but we're going to be getting very close to the point we could fire that up. So just edging forward with progress on that. Utah, we're on pretty intensively now. Various avenues of progress on this. Dean's just turned up today And if you remember the fiberglass curved trim panels we'd made for the sides of the boot, they've been upholstered. Now they actually carry on the two-tone black and cognac leather that runs throughout the interior with a sort of curved division running down the curve of the panel. What we wanted to do though was, because that two-tone is going to carry on the bulkhead that sits at the front of the boot, and we wanted to get those side panels done first, get everything installed so we could then mark exactly where the join was on the bulkhead panel, so we could then come up with the line and where the division between the two colours will be on the bulkhead. So when all those panels are in, everything lines up perfectly. So Dean's picked up that bulkhead panel today and dropped off the side panels. He's also dropped off the boot carpet. I've been working on the B-pillar trims. Scott's made those up in plastic. And I've just upholstered those in, again, that matching two-tone cognac and black leather. And then Dean also dropped off today what is really the keystone of the interior, is the parts for the centre console. And so the side panels that we made previously and the little rear panel that are now leathered. They've got that French seam running around where we made a groove in the top to set the excess from the French seam in, so it sits really perfect. So James and I literally are just buttoning up the wiring on that centre console so we can fit the side panels. That'll finish off the centre console. We've got the carpets now in. We're going to get the seats in, the front seats in. Back seat we have had in. I've just been assembling the armrest on that. And again, as with all these things, that job was more complicated than it might sound. The armrest actually folds down on a metal hinge, like a scissor hinge arrangement. And when we stripped it apart, originally that hinge has got just what appears to be just like a roughly painted grey finish on it. And although you can't see a lot of it, you can see a bit of it when the armrest is fully open. And we were keen to make that a bit more special looking, so we actually took it all apart and had all the parts of that scissor hinge chrome plated. But to make that more complicated, it's originally attached with hammer-on rivets, so we had to drill all those out. We've sourced another set of those hammer-in rivets. They're just solid aluminium rivets. So earlier today we were just using the fly press next door to repress a new set of solid aluminium rivets to attach all of those chrome parts back together. I've now got that assembly on the armrest and the back seat back finished, so that can go in now. And then with the front seats in, I'm going to do another job which I've been waiting to get done, which is that George has designed a mirror mount that comes down here that will be machined from billet to hold the mirror here. But before we get that done, I want to be absolutely sure that the range of movement on the mirror is suitable to give you decent vision. And I wanted to get the seat in so I could actually sit in the seat and look in the mirror and see that that was acceptable. So later today the seat should be in, I'll be able to do that, and then we can green light or edit the machining of this mirror mount. But yeah, we're really on that point where everything can come together pretty quickly on this now. I'm going to get the wood trims in the other side of the roof there as well, and that really will button up the interior very quickly. Once Dean's upholstered that bulkhead panel for in the boot, that'll be the boot more or less finished off as well. So we're getting very close again. It feels like this is the case with almost all the cars in this row actually. We're getting very close to the point that we'll be at testing phase on this. So yeah, looking forward to that immensely. And last but not least, over here Adam's working on some of the MX-5 parts for the Morris. Now we've actually had a lot of parts come back this week for the Morris from both powder coating and Xylan coating. I touched on that earlier. Now Xylan coating is basically a very thin film coating that's extremely tough, that is ideal for use on components where you've got like a mated finish that's bolted and you don't want any give in the material. You often find with painted or powder coated finish, when you bolt the components together, if there's still paint or powder coated in the mating faces, it compresses over time and the bolts actually go loose. Whereas Xylan doesn't have any of that, and it's actually a thin enough coating that you can put it on nuts and bolts and on the threads and still do them up, but it doesn't damage it and it doesn't bind them up at all. So it's great for doing nuts and bolts as well as components that have got mated finishes on them. So on the Morris, for instance, things like the hub carriers, all the nuts and bolts that to do with the suspension have been done with it. But as it is a sprayed coating, it doesn't necessarily protect against corrosion on something where you can't get it onto all the faces. So things like the wishbones or something like the diff casing on that car, we still choose powder coat, because on those we can blast it, zinc metal spray it, and then powder coat it. And although that's also line of sight, so you can't necessarily get inside the higher sections of the wishbone, the zinc metal spray acts as a sacrificial coating and protects things that are even just near it in terms of the steel in the surrounding areas, and that's why we use it on the underbody coatings on cars as well. So that's what's been going on there. As I say, powder coat wise, we've got the diff casing back, wishbones all round. On the diff, Adam was having a look at the actual differential itself, and there was some damage on the crown wheel, so we're just looking at potentially replacing that with new. We're going to see if we can get a new complete diff from Mazda. If we can't, we'll look at just getting the crown wheel and pinion. But we're going through the motions of building up all of the mechanical running gear for that car now and getting everything ready, so when the shell's finished paint next door, we'll be in a position to get it rolling with the engine and gearbox in pretty swiftly. On the subject of gearbox, Adam's literally working on that now. Now it's a Mazda NC, so third generation MX-5 5-speed box. But we, at the dry build stage, actually transplanted an NB rear casing on, and it's actually quite interesting that the two gearboxes, although different in a lot of ways in terms of the main casing, the tail housing is interchangeable. And there were a number of reasons for us doing that. One, that we're running an NB rear end, and we wanted to use the backbone that joins the gearbox and the rear subframe together. So we wanted the mounts that suit the NB backbone, which obviously are part of the NB rear casing on the gearbox. And also on the NB, there are what look like two different shifter positions, and one of them's capped off, the forward one's capped off. And we know we wanted to move the shifter forwards. And Nat thought, I wonder if we can actually transplant the shifter to the other position, and sure enough, you can. If you drill another hole in the selector shaft for the roll pin that holds the actual quadrant in place, you can move the quadrant forward, bolt the shifter into the forward position, blank off the rear position, and it all works perfectly. And also, there's not a speedo drive output on the casting of the NC tail housing, because it's taken from it gets its speed information from the wheel speed sensors for the ABS. But the output shaft still has the machining on it for the gear, so you're able to swap the NB gear, speedo drive gear, onto the NC output shaft and use the speedo drive. And it's an electronic sensor which will then work. We'll just need to program our aftermarket speedo to have the correct number of pulses per mile for that to work. But yeah, that combination of parts worked really well, because you've then got an NC gearbox, which is a brand new item we've got from Mazda, with the forward gear position, gear shift position, and the backbone mounts for the NB backbone. So works out really nicely. So yeah, that's where we're at with those parts on the MX-5. Nat will show you the paintwork progress on that in a second. I think that's it for in here, so I'll hand over to Nat now.
Well, thank you, Cal, for the handover. I've got my cup firmly welded into my hand. Mugs, if anybody wants to buy a mug, you can buy them. This one's full of Lemsip, because I'm full of cold, so if I sound like I'm full of a cold, I do apologise. I'm just about managing to focus a fuzzy brain. We're going to start with Morris through here. Obviously, you've heard a little bit about other progress on the mechanical progress on the Morris through there. Here we've got a bit of more bodywork progress. You remember last week was chiefly sanding. This week's chiefly more sanding. Earlier in the week, we've had a little bit of an issue getting hold of some sprayable polyester. However, we've now got some, and the car is now coated with the sprayed polyester, and Gaz and Steve are now getting through the blocking process on that. They're not there yet, but they're getting slowly through that. There'll be, I think we're going to need some more polyester on it, another build and another blocking session. But they're getting through it now, finding the bits we've missed. You get to a point with this work on the car where you need to spray a general coat of a build on, so that you can actually work out whether you're right or not. It's very hard when you've got patchy little patches of filler. It's very hard to gauge whether your surfaces are good or not. You can't really put a gloss onto them. With this, you can spray this with panel wipe now and get a gloss to the surface and just double check that everything looks right, as well as working by feel and as well as working by guide coat. actually putting some gloss on the panel and being able to see whether it just looks right is quite important, and you can't really do that when it's multicoloured. So we're getting pretty close now. I think we are going to need, certainly that door, but we're going to need some more polyester on it in places. But it's certainly progressing forwards now, and yeah, the finishing line's getting closer to being in sight. I'm not going to say it's in sight, but it's closer to getting into sight now. The panels have been on and off a few times, trying to get alignments right, which are all pretty good now. So yeah, moving forward, but just lots more sanding, lots more dust. So yeah, again, have another look in another week, and we'll be pretty close then. Right, marching on from there, we'll wander this way. We'll walk round the Jensen, which is currently awaiting some off-site work that's going on. We haven't forgotten about it. The roof, I think we mentioned it before, I'll just mention it in walking past. We are having a tool machine for the roof to set the aperture for when we put the glass roof into this. We're having a glass roof made, and the same CAD data is being used for making the glass and making the aperture. And the tool for making the aperture on the mould is being machined in MDF at the moment, and so we're using that time to get on with to juggle jobs basically and get the progress made on the Morris while we're awaiting the tooling for carrying on with this, which is why this is sat out here. So moving on, we'll go on to Land Cruiser. I'll squiz around the back and we can point out what Tom's been working on. This week the main focus has been on carrying on with the rear seat. We started that at the very tail end of last week. I don't know whether that was in any of last week's footage or not, but the owner wants a temporary use, optional use rear seat in this. So we've come up with a seat which we've fabricated using the basics from a Discovery 4 commercial rear seat. It's the rear seat that you would put in the back of a Discovery commercial to make it be able to seat 4 people, or 5 people I guess, which just seemed an easy way of doing it without having to fabricate everything from scratch. So we've got one of those, narrowed it, and then this enables, this has got a fold mechanism which is reasonably neat. Obviously it's not trimmed, it doesn't look much when it's not trimmed, and obviously this will all fold a lot neater when it's actually all working correctly and got trim and cushions and things on it. And that goes up there, and that's then more or less parallel. Once that's actually in its finished position like that, it's all pretty much parallel to the back of the front seats when they're all in their final positions. And then we're going to put some locking pins in here, well, locking threads actually, that will lock this down in that position, that when it's in its running position, so to speak, we'll also bolt it down, and they'll be rated for seatbelt load. So it's optional to put, we won't be fitting seatbelts to this, but we will be putting some child seat points in, which will then be able to pass a seatbelt rated load point in the floor. Again, it's going to be chiefly used off-road. It's not really for doing any great on-road distances. It's just that the owner would like to be able to put his kids in the back of them and not fly out of the seat if he goes over a bit of a bump. So that's the plan there. Tom's also been working on the final little bits of the front seats. There was some finishing off bits needed on there with the latch mechanisms, the folding latch mechanisms needed finishing off, the locking pins for those needed doing, and various other little bits of finishing off on the seat fold mechanisms, and getting the cushions in, because we've got to put some little recesses into the wooden backing on the seat cushions to enable them to fit over the captive nuts that hold the seat onto its runners. He's also got the runners all in place and the release mechanisms for the runners all working, so the seats are just fore and aft. That's all done and in and fitted now. And then I think the final bit is he's just started to have a look at, but not really made much progress on yet, the filler neck. We've got an off-the-shelf standard stainless steel filler cap and neck, which we can weld on. Wanted to do that in stainless steel. Tom had started knocking up a little stainless steel filler neck. We can now weld that onto this this machine piece that we've bought, and then we'll cut a stainless flange on the CNC plasma to weld onto that to enable us to bolt that into the body, and that'll all be hidden behind it's all very utilitarian, which is what we wanted. That's kind of the idea with this. And then there'll be he's got to fit the original flat back. The replacement quarter sections don't come with the holes in them for mounting the filler flap, so we've got to we've got to do that. That's another little step to sort out on there. And then further to that, other interior work, George has designed the switch knobs for the switches that are going into the dash, which are bespoke switches, again designed to look quite utilitarian and functional, but in keeping with a nice clean design. He's done those. The customer was given a few options in terms of the style of those because we weren't 100% sure. We got a basic idea, but a bit of refinement was needed. The customer's gone and chosen exactly what was wanted there. So we've then finalised the design. I think they've now gone to machinists for machining from aluminium. In the meantime, we'll use the 3D printed mock-ups of those, which we've had temporarily on the dash area. We'll use those plus the knowledge of what switchgear we're actually fitting to be able to put the apertures in the dash, get all that prepped and ready. And then the next round of work is we've got a bit of work to do on the pedal box. Obviously it's now automatic, it was a manual pedal box, so the clutch pedal will be going. We're modifying the brake pedal, changing the angle slightly because they're a bit too vertical at the minute, they're not very nice to use, so we're going to change that slightly and put a bigger pedal pad on for the brake pedal. And Tom's also going to fit the wiper mechanism so that we can make sure that all works. That should all just be original, but we've just got to make sure it's actually going to fit and actually going to work. So there's those bits left to do, and then next week we're going to have a bit of a heads together and work out all the final bits. We're going to do a bit more final build and then work out all the final bits in terms of wiring, routing, plumbing, routing, provisioning for mounting all the wiring and plumbing, getting all that sorted. And then lastly, the bit of work I've been doing, which is not very photogenic, is further on the brake conversion. I thought I'd probably end up going back on what I said last week, where I said I'd be able to use the 60 series Land Cruiser hubs and 60 series discs and then be able to make my own caliper brackets. Yes, I can't because, well, it would technically be possible, but the caliper brackets would be very spindly and I'm not convinced by the strength of them. The bracket would have to fit in a very small space behind the disc, between the disc and the stub axle face. There's not much material, not much space for much material there, and I'm not convinced they'll be strong enough. I've seen a conversion that does fit in that space. I'm not going to do it that way. I don't like it. So I now need some 60 series knuckle housings, the swivel housings. So a little appeal, if anybody in the UK watching this has a 60 series Land Cruiser front axle or any 60 series Land Cruiser knuckle housings, that'd be great because they're not very common in the UK. There's plenty in Australia, plenty in the USA, not many in the UK, and I'd rather not have to ship them from overseas. So I'm trying to track down at the moment either a complete 60 series front axle at a reasonable price because I won't need the diff, or just a set of knuckle housings because I've got the hubs. I could go with just the knuckle housings. So if anybody's got any, let us know because that would be useful because that'll be the final piece for the front brake conversion. We've got a plan for the rear brake conversion, which will include handbrake provision because we're using, readers with longer memories than me will remember we're using an 80 series Land Cruiser transmission, an A440F automatic transmission with the V8 engine in this, which doesn't have a handbrake or a parking brake on the transmission output. And obviously the original Land Cruiser, this 40 series Land Cruiser did, so it doesn't have any provision on the axle. So currently there's no park brake provision, but I'm going to be putting that, doing a disc conversion on the back with a parking brake provision. 99% I've got that idea, the plan sorted for that. I'm just waiting for some discs to fit to check it's actually going to work, but I think it will. So if it does, I'll be able to update you with what it was next week. I'm not going to say what the parts are until I know they fit. So moving on from there, we'll go along to the Churchill two-door Mark II Jaguar, and Jamie can go that way round and I'll go this way round, and we'll meet by Stu in the middle. Stu is literally live working on the door. His main objective this week has been creating a large door, which is looking pretty impressive. He's getting on pretty well. He's chopped the door up slightly more than was originally planned in that he's found a few clearance issues, chiefly between the central locking and the window runner mechanism. And also, further to that, some clearance issues between the proposed options on the electric window operating mechanism and the glass movement mechanism inside the door and the inner door structure. So he's decided after all that to simply cut out the whole of the inside of the door structure. I might just come around this side, then I can point at stuff, but basically he's decided to cut out the whole of the inside door structure and just refabricate it. It's not going to stay just a big flat piece of sheet. There'll be various pressings in this that we'll press in once he's got that all planned, which is what he's working on at the moment. There'll be access holes for things like the central locking and the window winder motor. The issue was just that the door thickness, we always knew it was going to be a little bit tight, but the door thickness is such that it's extremely difficult to get everything packaged in the space. Now we've got a window lift mechanism that we know that fits in the space, that's easily available, that's new. So we're going to use that. We've bought a pair of those and we're going to use those in the door and build around those. But we know, having got one on the Jensen, we know what space they'll fit in. We use the same type of mechanism on that. So we know they're quite narrow and the space they'll fit in. He's got the X300 Jaguar, we've mentioned before, X300 Jaguar lock mechanism and central locking motor. And then the latch striker for that is also X300 Jag, which is now built into the Mark II Jaguar B-pillar structure. And then obviously he's lengthened the top rail on the door, lengthened the bottom rail on the door, done various rot repairs on the original parts of the door because there was some bits of rot in it. Put a reinforcer channel along the top. There was a very short reinforcement channel that carried the top frame structure. It's originally a very short piece. He's now made that full length so that it carries a little bit more stiffness into the door. And then he's going to use the original shaped top section for the door. He's going to use the front part of that because there's a compound curvature plus this profile on that front section. So he's going to use that and then cut and match in a new section sort of from here-ish back as a separate piece at the top like we have done here, and then make the lower part of the door skin separate, and then we'll do a full length weld along there to join the two and then clinch it around the frame. So that will basically make the outer skin of the door. This will all develop. It'd be hard for me to, me trying to explain it now won't mean a lot, but you'll see next week that this will have a load of holes in and press sections. We'll basically work out where the access points need to be, then we'll either make or use one that we've already got, a press tool, press some recesses into the panel, and then cut the bottoms of those pressings out, and that'll add reinforcement and access into the panel. So that'll develop over the next sort of few days, and you'll see that on next week's video. So yeah, we'll big doors on the way. So that's that. And then behind camera, if I step round this lift pillar, we have Series 3 V12 E-Type Jag, which you may be aware of as the new project in town. The progress on this week has been blasting it. Now you'll probably see that in another video we're doing in another series, our autofocus series on vehicle our take on vehicle restoration and our opinions on things, and we'll be interested to see how much we get corrected. But yeah, there's quite an in-depth on a few bits to do with this in that video. However, the main progress this week has been that the undercoating, seam sealer, organic coatings, everything else have been burnt and stripped and scraped off this. And then this has been blasted with crushed glass and lightly etch primed. And then we've also Rich has also blasted the front frame for it. And then the next phase on this will be bolting it all back together, fairly loosely, but with everything in the right places. Engine back in, transmission back in, I think, for the moment. The original transmission back in for the moment. Front frame back on, and the suspension back in, so that we can get it rolling. Probably on dummy shock absorbers, so we can get it at ride height with everything else off. So that then we can do some scanning work on the body shell to pick up the mounting points that we need on the interior and the shape for various parts on the interior, and also plan a lot of stuff to do with the HVAC and various peripherals to do with the engine installation, so we can get all that planned. We can also plan the body modifications and make decisions on what we're doing in composites and what we're doing in metal, whether we're using carbon fibre on some parts or whether we're doing it all in metal. There's various decisions still to make there. But regardless of how we do that, we're going to need various scan data. Certainly for the rear end, we need scan data around the back, because below the the rear deck panel seam, we'll be removing all the rear end because that's all going to be reprofiled for the body changes. And on the front, again, the lower front section will need to be scanned because round where the bumper fits, there's got to be a load of changes made to the front as well. So they're the next stages on this. It's now clean, not too rotten. There are a few bits in it. The floors would probably repair, whether we just replace them anyway, I don't know. A few bits of repair at the front, sure we'll find some more. Quite a lot of accident damage at the back. It's had quite a lot of poorly repaired accident damage. Probably upset some of our friends in the USA here, but it seems to be a common theme that cars from the USA seem to generally have, or certainly the ones we've dealt with, seem to typically have an awful lot of self-tapper slide hammer pull that's then been filled over in, and this was no different. There's an enormous amount of slide hammer pull damage around the back where it's had various bits of rear end, fairly light rear end damage, that's been slide hammered out with self tappers. So it's like it's peppered with shotgun damage, but it's actually just slide hammer pulls on crash damage on the back end. So that's where we're at with that, and you'll be able to see where that progresses again next week. That's hopefully, if all goes to plan, I'm not sure yet, but hopefully if all goes to plan, we'll be able to get that back rolling in time for next week's video. But we'll see where that ends up. That's the plan. Whether that's where we end up, we don't know. And I think that's covered everything this side. I'm just looking around to make sure I haven't missed anything obvious, but no, I don't think I have. So I think that's everything for this week. So have a good time, and we'll see you in a week's time.